Monster Hunter is the latest film from Paul W.S. Anderson, starring his wife, Milla Jovovich, which is an adaptation of a video game franchise. I don't know why I'm doing quotes. This movie is about when Paul W.S. Anderson, the director of Mortal Kombat and then the director of the Resident Evil franchise, decided, you know what? I know a lot of people hated how I made the Resident Evil franchise into a movie series that was completely different from the games, but what if I did that again? And then cast the same actress who is also my wife in that movie again, and pretty much learned from no mistakes and no critiques, and just did everything the exact same way again. And that's Monster Hunter. I was not excited for this movie at all. I know some people were like, oh man, the trailer doesn't actually look that bad, because for some reason there's a lot of Paul W.S. Anderson apologists that are just like, man, his movies are crazy. That's why I enjoy them so much, even though the action's incomprehensible, and the acting sucks, and the stories are balls, and the VFX work is kind of choppy, as well as the editing. I still enjoy them though, and I'm excited to see another crazy Paul W.S. Anderson movie. I will never understand fans of Paul W.S. Anderson's movies. If you enjoy them, then obviously more power to you. I just will never be able to comprehend it as somebody who enjoys well-made movies. I haven't seen his Resident Evil movies since like the last one came out, so that it's almost been 4 years because that was like 2017. But I remember hating them all. I can at least give Monster Hunter this. I think I'd rather watch this again than any of those Resident Evil movies, but overall I've just never really been a fan of Paul W.S. Anderson's film career. Even Mortal Kombat when that came out. I remember sitting down about to watch it with the knowledge in my head of people saying that not only is this the best video game adaptation because there's a lot of shitty ones, but this one is legitimately good. And me, at like 10 years old or something like that, watched it and went, well, that sucked. Me, at 10 years old, when I'm supposed to love everything and hate like a few select things, I did not like Mortal Kombat. So I don't like any of his video game movies. The Three Musketeers is bad. His Alien vs. Predator movie is also not very good. And Pompeii is awful and kind of offensive, actually, how bad it is. How they kind of took that real tragedy of Pompeii and made a Paul W.S. Anderson movie out of it. It's kind of bad in every single way. So forgive me if I was not excited or easily swayed by what could have been just a good trailer edit for his next film, Monster Hunter. And also don't be surprised when I say that I did not like this movie. It's not good. But it's at least somewhat better than those Resident Evil movies, at least. I'd have to rewatch his other movies to see where it kind of stacks up, because obviously I'm not a fan of his. I'm not actively going back and recently watching any of his stuff. So I would have to if I was going to rank his filmography, but this one is at least has some redeeming qualities that I'll mention right now. The score done by Paul Haslinger, he's worked with Paul W.S. Anderson before. I can at least say that was kind of groovy to listen to. It had like a really cool kind of pop synthy kind of soundtrack to it, which I don't know if it's accurate to the music in the games. I've not played the games, by the way, but it at least sounded good. It was something I was like, oh, that's appealing to listen to. Nice job there. I can also say that the creature designs looked really great. I can't really commend them for coming up with the creatures, that's all on the game. But at least bringing them into live action, the VFX department actually did a pretty good job. They all look, for the most part, pretty great. And also the setups for the action sequences made me want to have fun with the movie. They kind of have a variety of stuff, like at one point there's like an alien-esque kind of horror sequence, and then there's, you know, fighting a dinosaur or a martial arts fight. There's aspects of the way they craft these action scenes that make me want to get interested in everything going on, that I'm like, this could be really fun. And you did come in here with at least some ideas on how to make this movie. It's not like you just showed up and wanted to do everything on the fly. But what gets in this movie's way, like every other Paul W.S. Anderson movie, is Paul W.S. Anderson. This guy really is an enigma, because he's been criticized. All of his movies have been criticized for years, and he has not learned a goddamn thing, or he doesn't want to learn a goddamn thing. This is the kind of movie that he enjoys making and doesn't care what anyone says. He's like, well, you don't like that, but I do, so I'm going to do it again and again. And that same sensibility of just doing whatever I want, it will ultimately bite him in the ass. I don't even know why he got the job for this. I looked it up on Wikipedia, like, is there like a detailed backstory on how he got the job? Like, did he say, I'll continue making the Resident Evil franchise, or I'll make Pompeii for you guys, only if you give me the rights to Monster Hunter, or some shit like that? And apparently the only story behind this movie is just he grew to be a fan of it because he traveled to Japan. He grew to be a fan of Monster Hunter through that, and then around 2012, there was like some rumors that he was attached, and then ultimately they did announce that he was the one making it. That's it. Which, guys, people at Sony, in 2012, no one would have liked if Paul W.S. Anderson was announced back then for a Monster Hunter movie as well. I don't know what the thought process is of, hey, that guy who made the video game adaptation that fans of that game series hate, let's do that again, but with Monster Hunter. And I guess expect different results? I don't know. I know he said, like, this is my passion project because I walked around Japan and became a fan of Monster Hunter, but goddamn, I'm sure there's more fans of Monster Hunter that are directors that would have loved to have written an interesting story about this. From what I know, there's no military in the game. It's just people out in this world hunting monsters. There's something interesting that you can do with that, but Paul W.S. Anderson doesn't know interesting. He just knows what he likes, and what he likes is bullshit. Because seriously, imagine a Monster Hunter movie like in the vein of like Genndy Tartakovsky's Primal, where it's just like you have no trace of modern day, and your main character is just in this wilderness, and you're experiencing everything through him, and maybe there's like an important theme that you can put into that, or some other story. You know, there's got to be something else that's better than, let's just send military guys through a portal because there's some sky tower that's opening portals and they get transported to this world and now they gotta survive. And really just one of them because the rest is cannon fodder. The only interesting character in this movie is Tony Jaa, and it's only because the humor of him trying to interact with Milla Jovovich, and they don't speak the same language, so they have to do certain movements or say certain things slowly so they can understand. That's inherently funny, and Tony Jaa plays it very well. They don't really spend a whole lot of time with him or the rest of his group that show up later on in the movie. It's just stuff that Ron Perlman shows up to exposition the shit out of, and then we just kind of move on. You don't feel like you're living in this world, or you're really being properly introduced to this community of people or the world. Yet it's just, all right, we got to keep moving. This movie's like, what, an hour and a half? Yeah, we gotta move, which, hey, I know a lot of people are like, don't waste time, just keep stuff moving and don't dwell on stuff. But once again, I feel like I've said this a lot, I really like scenes or movies taking their time to flesh stuff out or to get you to care. I know the sensibility of like a lot of action movies is, I don't care, I just want stuff to happen and keep going. But god damn it, that ultimately I think leads to like a weaker movie if you don't care about a lot of the people involved. Or if it's moving too quickly, it's hard to get your head wrapped around the situation. And I'm not saying this movie is hard to follow, not at all, but the fact that it's moving so quickly and the plot is so bare bones and the people are lame, but there's interesting potential for them, that creates a frustrating experience. And even though Ron Perlman is looking a little goofy with that wig on, I would easily watch a whole movie with these people in the leads instead of Milla Jovovich and her band of military dudes. You know what I'm saying? They are awful, all of them. And I don't just mean character-wise, because yes, they are rushed. There's barely anything to them as far as character relationships or backstory. Milla Jovovich has like a wedding ring that she like kisses at one point and is like, I'm coming back. And then they just never bring that up again or reference its importance. It's just a thing for her to have to make you think that there's something going on with her. So I don't just mean as far as like their writing goes, they're awful, because the jokes, holy shit, they got in trouble for like a Chinese joke that they did, so they had to cut it out, but the rest of the jokes remain and they're still awful and don't really make a lot of sense. But these actors, they are not good. Milla Jovovich, I actually don't mind as a person. She seems very lovely, and there's one time where Hellboy came out and she was talking about the critics' response, and she was like, you know, they can say whatever they want, but I'm proud of what I do, you know what I'm saying? And I respect that a lot out of her. Like, to have people shit on a lot of movies that you're in, but to have the mindset of, I like them, I'm having a good time, I don't care. You know, that I can at least admire, because honestly, if I was in that situation where I was in a lot of movies and was constantly getting shit on, I would have self-doubts, probably be really depressed. So to see someone actually in a good mindset about the career that she has, good for her, you know? I respect her a lot for that. I know some people are like, how dare she talk about the critics like that? But it's like, man, if she was saying just like, fuck critics, who needs them, they fucking suck, then that'd be a different thing. But she was just kind of explaining like, it just doesn't bother me, you know? And I don't think there's anything wrong with someone explaining why something doesn't bother them because they're having a good life. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, these are just movies, and whether they're bad, it's not ruining our lives. That's for sure. At the end of the day, it's just a piece of media, if you really think about it. So I respect her a lot, but she's not good in this movie. Like, every single line delivery is, like, completely awful. And even though she sometimes gets lifted up because she's working off of Tony Jaa, a lot of the times, her lines just fall flat, and the jokes just thud. I want to buy her as an action star because she's got the right, like, serious action star face, and she's got the physique to convince you that she could totally survive some of these situations that seem impossible for any normal person. But it's when she has to say stuff when it gets really bad. And it, you know, it just doesn't help that these action scenes are horrible, you know, the quick cuts, the editing, the cinematography. He's working with the same team, pretty much. It's like the same cinematographer, same editor. It's like the same team from his other movies. They literally haven't learned anything. They're just doing whatever. And it's like, I don't know why there are people out there that are like, I just like how crazy it gets. How? You can't understand what's happening. The movie opens with an action scene in the dark on a pirate ship, and it's cutting so quickly, and there's so much going on that I could not lock down on like a specific thing. Like, okay, what am I following? I don't know what I'm following. And then something happens to end that scene where I was like, sure, I guess. Fuck it. I guess this happened. And the way this movie ends, the plot is so bare bones already, as I mentioned, but the third act doesn't even feel like a third act. Like, the way they structured it, it just feels so... It doesn't feel like anything. It just feels like a scene that is happening like near the middle of the movie or like the end of the second act, but what you're watching is actually the entire final battle of the third act, and I'm like, what the fuck? Is this actually coming to a close? And then we got literally a Mortal Kombat ending. I know you directed Mortal Kombat, but we don't need a Mortal Kombat or even like Resident Evil-esque ending where it's an obvious cliffhanger and everything's not really resolved, but, well, we're at the end of the movie now. Like, we haven't really reached it narratively, but this is the point where the movie stops. Enjoy. We'll see you next year for part 2, even though we won't. It's like, man... I don't get him. I don't get fans of his movies, and I don't get him, why he thinks... Because he's a writer on these, too. He's a writer on a lot of these movies that he directs. So I don't understand what his goal is with making these. Because no one seems to be having, like, a legitimate good time with them. Even people that like to defend his stuff kind of admit at some point, like, yeah, it's not great, and not particularly good in the traditional sense. So I don't get it. I don't understand. I'm gonna give Monster Hunter a C-. This movie definitely could have been good if you had given it to somebody else, a different creative team, but I don't know what Sony's goal was, but they brought back Paul W.S. Anderson, and he did exactly what he's been doing for the past several years with the Resident Evil movies, everything else he's done. And I'm just done. You know, I would like to see him maybe challenge himself and do something else or work with a screenwriter that gives him a good story. And also I'd like to see him adapt a different filmmaking style, like where the action is clear and the camera maybe is just kind of still or moving with the motion of the action so you can follow it well. But that's too much. You know, there's martial arts fights with Tony Jaa and Milla Jovovich, like 2 of them. And it's cutting so quickly. And I'm like, man... These fight moves could be so cool. I'm sure Tony Jaa is really selling it, but you're not showing that off. You keep cutting around, and it's distractingly awful. But if you've seen Monster Hunter, leave in the comments below what you thought of it. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.